5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome to the podcast, Curiosity is Key to Knowledge, where we'll ask a question, but we probably won't answer it. I'm here with my co-host, CRex. How are you doing today?
I'm great. And you?
Tired, but good.
Tired, yeah. Kind of early for you, but that's okay.
Well, especially since I went to bed at 3 a.m., so I didn't help myself one bit for trying to be awake for this.
No, you didn't.
No. That's the problem with video games. You get sucked in there and you have no idea what's happened to you. And then you're like, oh, look at the time.
Yeah.
What happened here? But I got stuff done. That's the thing about video games. You get stuff done. Because like during the day, you try to get this done, you try to get that done, you get a little bit of that, a little bit of this. But in a video game, there's just pure accomplishment. It's an adrenaline rush or dopamine.
Yep. No distractions at that time anyway, except the game. So that's good.
Yeah, well, I don't have any other responsibilities. My responsibilities are done. So I try to get everything done that I need to get done for the next day. So it's ready. And then I sit down and I can play video games. And it's my free time, my literal free time. Today we're going to discuss the topic of change, which is a huge topic, and there's no way we can talk really about a lot of it. But I'm going to start with the meaning of change, because it's important to find out what the real people think, because we're not real. So change, according to the dictionary, Oxford Languages, once again, we're going to go to England to find this out apparently.
Yeah.
As a verb, make someone or something different, alter, or modify. It's a noun, the act or insistence of making or becoming different. I think we're going to discuss it as a verb.
Right.
So change can be wanted or not wanted.
I was just thinking that.
Oftentimes it's not a choice.
Right.
Go back to the old saying, change is the only constant.
I didn't even think about that. You're right.
It mystified me the first time I heard it, because a constant is a complete opposite from change, and yet they're going to use them in the same sentence. What that means is that we're in constant change or evolution ourselves, just in general. From the moment we're born, everything is changing. Even before we're born, but we don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to discuss in utero because I have no concept of that.
Right, me either.
Even as a kid, what you know is constantly changing. What you think you understand is constantly changing. I can remember my dad talking to me about procrastination, basically. He said the problem with procrastination is that you always have to catch up. You're always constantly catching up. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what does ketchup have to do with this? Are we going to discuss mustard next? I don't understand what he's saying. Of course, he was saying catch up, but it was coming out as ketchup in my mind because I'd never heard those two words put together. So obviously I'm turning it into something I recognize. But meanwhile, that isn't what he was saying at all.
Right.
So I spent the whole entire talk. I mean, he was very judicious and very kind and all these wonderful things. But meanwhile, I was totally stuck on ketchup. I had to change my vocabulary to eventually go back and understand the lecture, although I couldn't quite remember it because I'd spent more time thinking about something else. Change can be something you go and do or something that comes and smacks you.
Right. And like you said, it's occurring all the time, but then it has an effect on people. It can be great or it can be horrible. Yes, it's how you handle it.
I agree with that. I think change to me is a surprise. Unless you're going for the change. When a change occurs, a lot of times you didn't instigate it. It just happens.
It disrupts your sense of stability and being able to predict what messes with that.
It does. And I think that's, to me, one of the more interesting aspects of change is it's really very upsetting. I was talking with somebody about surprise parties. And, my surgeon, chit-chatting and stuff while we're preparing to slice me open. She said, I don't like surprises. And of course, she'd already had a surprise because they discovered the breast cancer. So she was already in the midst of a surprise. And she said, but I don't think there's going to be any surprises today. I said, most people don't like surprises because It's a sudden change.
Yeah,
I don't like surprise parties.
yeah. Then you go back to that anxiety and anxious feeling that we talked about earlier. People don't like them.
For the most part, people, I think, can tolerate change, but I don't know that they necessarily like change.
Exactly. Sometimes you're forced into it, like say the death of
Mm.
someone. Not that it didn't affect me, but I watched my mother-in-law and my mother after my dad died and Ruth's dad died. And the physical changes were very apparent.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't happen at the same time, but as I look back on it, they both withdrew from crowds, but then they stood by their faith and went to church and did their, I guess, meditation is what helped get them through it, I'm
Right.
sure.
Their
But
routine of
yeah, they
the
tried to set
important
up
things.
new routines.
Mm-hmm.
I just know it's very hard for my mom. I know it was. I didn't live with my mother-in-law, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
she took it day by day. My father passed like the week of Father's Day, and my oldest sister walked in on Father's Day and said, I just don't know how we can get through this. I mean, it only been just a few days. And my mom just looked at her and said, it's just another day for me. It doesn't matter if it's Father's Day or not. That sunk into me very well. I was like, well, she does have a point because my dad took care of my mom. And she was one of those wives that stayed at home and reared the children. But my dad came in every day and helped her. So it's not like you stay at home and do all the housework while I go out and bring in the money. I think that attributed to mom's anxiety and stress and the change since they've been together so long. And I don't know if she ever really got over my dad's death, but she functioned, she laughed again and all that. But it took a while.
Right.
But that probably doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about today.
Well, no, it's another form of change. It's just another
Yeah.
form. There's change that can bring on something positive and change that can bring on something
And
negative.
other people that just absolutely fold and can't function in society when another, not necessarily death, but any kind of major change,
Mm-hmm.
they just go, they fold. I don't know, it's hard to explain how people react to change. You never know what you're going to do.
They're reticent. They become reticent
Yes.
and withdraw, as you said, and hide and avoid.
And I think they have to sit down and figure it out. What am I going to do next? Am I just going to sit here and wither away, or am I going to stand up and go on with life? That particular case with death, I take on it.
Death or some other type of loss that is not necessarily a death, but it's a loss.
Yes.
Does it stop you in your tracks or do you keep going?
I can't think of an example, but I've heard people say it was just like a death to me. Whatever happened.
One of the things change is then in my mind is a surprise. It's a surprise.
Oh, yes.
Or it can be. Then you have the changing of the weather. That's
Yes.
completely out of our hands.
And when my kids went to college, that was really a big change for them. Small town, knew everybody from first grade through 12th, and then they go to college. Another whole ball game. I think my oldest one handled it not too well because she came home every weekend, and she was like an hour and a half away. Second one, totally different. We never saw her. She never moved back home. She absolutely loved it, the social, the whole thing. So her change was very positive. She thrived.
Mm-hmm.
My son was like 3 hours away, which is a little bit further, so he had to figure it out a lot more than my girls. My girls called more than he did. He tried to do it on his own. It's weird how all three of them were different and how they handled the big change.
Right. It's like, does birth order play into it? And we're not going to get into that, but it is an interesting question.
Yeah, it is. It is that middle child. Gracious.
Yes. Well, I don't have a middle child, so I don't have anything to say about that.
But I think your child handles change very well, being independent and all that, any kind of changes. From what I've seen,
Mm.
you live with him, so you know how he handles it.
He handles everything really well until something doesn't work. If it doesn't work, then he gets really upset. And I'm like, but if we continue to be bothered by it, we're just going to have a heart failure anyway. So
Right.
why not say, what's the next step? Or we can say what went wrong so we can change it. Haha, there's that word.
Yeah.
Uh, but beyond that, yeah, he handles change really well. I ponder whether being in an orphanage really makes a difference for that, because every day is either a routine, which I think was just a routine, because it's like everything happens at the same time. Breakfast is at this time. So I imagined that it was just time of day, time of day, time of day, time of day.
Yeah.
And he was thrilled to get out of it. So maybe he embraces change more so because he wanted out.
Right. I agree.
So his circumstances taught him to embrace change.
You're right. And I'm sure he doesn't remember a lot, but his basic instinct kicks in of what he had to do when he was in the orphanage. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do think that's what happened, because he doesn't remember anything before the age of 10. One of the things that I think is disrupting about change is when we constantly have expectations of the way things are going to go. And maybe that's one of the differences, is he doesn't have any expectation about how things are going to go very often. Unless something breaks, then he's a little bit upset, a lot bit. And I don't mean by throwing a temper tantrum or anything like that. He just gets really angry with things not working. But that's because he has an expectation. One of the articles that I've read is the importance of being a lifelong beginner. Everything is new, and you know it's going to be new, and you're going to treat it as if it's new. Then you haven't got an expectation, so you're not as likely to be upset, and maybe you'll even be excited about things.
That's a great thing. I've never thought about that like that. That's cool.
I got the idea originally from a book I read called Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, Suzuki, I think it is. But
Hmm.
this is Brendan Leonard, who wrote a bunch of short articles, and that was one of them that he wrote, and it reminded me of Zen Mind, Beginner Mind. So it's basically, that book is about meditation, but it's also about approaching everything as brand new. And then when change occurs, you weren't expecting anything. Ergo, you're not upset.
And when these changes are good and you embrace them when you're not expecting the outcome and the change occurs, it's not so bad. You kind of get a confidence. Oh, I can handle this. No matter what's thrown at me, I can handle it.
Right? That's how I try to travel, with the idea that there are some patterns, at least in the countries that I go to. I understand the patterns. India, I didn't understand the patterns. When I went to India, I totally went with the idea of nothing. I have no expectation of what India is going to be like. Zero. I'm imagining that I will be staying with these people and they have a house, according to what I know. So I will probably be starting in a house. But amazingly, they had servants, household help.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
they had money. And part of having money is giving back. And they had people living behind their house. And the two
Okay.
ladies would come in and help all day long. And they were silent. You didn't even know where they were. So we'd have a period of time where there was no fan or anything because they cut the electricity. The
Gotcha.
government did. But it was the
Right.
highest part of the day of usage, so probably rolling blackouts, if you ask me. I would be sitting on the bed and I would be playing solitaire, and I'd get up to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, all of my cards were in a pack.
Oh no.
Well, I was only playing solitaire and not for money, so I was fine.
Yeah.
But I went into it with the idea that I had zero idea of what was happening. So when they took the cards, I was not bothered. It's like, well, I guess that's what they do. So I just made sure that I stacked them in a pack before I left, so that now I can handle them coming in and cleaning up behind me. But they'd straighten up the covers on the bed and everything. All the while when I'm in the bathroom, I never saw the person come in. I never saw the person leave.
Oh my God.
there it was, and that was the routine. So it's a good thing I went with no expectations, because that totally blew my mind if I had been expecting anything. But because I wasn't expecting anything, I could take that in stride and treat that as normal.
You're right.
I'm not as affected by change as I might have been. I think we can handle change better if we expect nothing or very little. Like, I do expect people to stop at a stop sign, and I am surprised when they don't. So there are things that I need to expect and anticipate. But for the most part, I don't think we need to think we know what's going on.
Yeah, because that'll just make it brutal.
Right. Because I have such a narrow view of how the world works, and the world is not narrow. I think the most amazing thing that happened, and again, I go back to India because there was nothing, it was so unlike an experience I've ever had, but I was never upset or disappointed or anything. It's just like, oh, who knew? One of the friends of the people I was staying with said, "You're going to drive." I'm like, I've seen the roads. There's things all over the road and people all over the road, and there's everybody's honking at each other. And it's like, that's inside my head. But I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to drive. He puts up his hand. It's the beginning of talk to the hand because the ears aren't listening.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So he puts his hand up and he says, "No, you will drive." And I was like, okay, so I need to be on the opposite side of the road. The gear shift is on the left, but everything else is on the right. It's the pedals and all are the same. A manual transmission car. I get into the car. I can't see the lines on the road. I don't know which side. I don't know if I'm in the middle. I don't know if I'm on the side. I can't see anything. And the fella says, "Oh, you have to honk the horn." I said, "I'm having such a hard time right now with everything. I give you permission to honk the horn," which means he could put his hand in front of me because now he's invading personal space, and I gave him permission. So he starts, daintily honking the horn. Beep, 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 beep. The seas parted. I could see the road. I could see where I needed to be. Everybody was out of my way, and he just gently honked the horn, and we made it all the way to our destination. I even could see where the cows were, so I could drive around them. What a difference. And then he insisted that I drive back, and I said, "You please honk the horn." That helped a lot. We came all the way back. Beep, 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 beep. The parting of the sea. When we finally get home, I said, "Dolly, uncle, please explain to me what happened. How did that work?" And he said, "For the most part, nothing on the road has a rearview mirror because there's carts being pulled by different types of animals.
Man.
There's 5 people on a scooter. There's people on bicycles. There's people pulling a rickshaw. There's scooter rickshaws. So there's a ton of stuff on the road. And India has to be one of the loudest places I've ever been, just by the movement of humanity and machines and things like that. So it's loud, and it's movement all the time on the roads. Even the people that live there are kind of surprised by things that are on the road. So Dolly uncle says most of everything on the road does not have a rearview mirror, and it's extremely loud, so they can't hear your engine coming. But if you honk your horn, people get out of the way. They don't really want to be in your way. They just don't know they're in your way. So you just alert them that you're there and then pass them. They'll get out of the way. That's not a problem. And that was my moment to realize that just because something seems like chaos doesn't mean that it really is. It just means I don't understand it.
When you were describing that, I couldn't help but think about Indiana Jones at the beginning of the movie.
The most recent movie?
No, the earliest one.
Yes.
When they were fleeing from somebody, I forgot who it was. They were all through the streets, and they were in India
Yes.
at that time.
Yes.
That's funny.
Absolutely.
Good description. Good description.
The way they described it in the movie is exactly the way that it is. It's constant. So constant change, because there's various things on the road. It's not an expected experience like here in the States, where you can pretty much know what's going to be on the road, give or take a few surprises. Yeah. So by the time I read the book Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, I was prepared for what it means to block everything out of your mind that you think you know because you don't, and to be prepared for things to be new. But I think in the end, if you don't have your mind made up about how things are going to be, then change is a lot more tolerable and maybe even welcomed.
Exactly. Yep. I agree.
I think we've
State of mind.
I think we've not answered the question about
Oh, yeah, really. We got kind of like, what do you call it? Going out on a pig path here and there. No end in sight. It's
there is no end in sight. You're absolutely correct. We could beat this subject up and never beat it down. Ever.
yeah, just kind of say what comes to your mind.
Well, that's what we do.
I feel like I didn't prepare myself very well for this. I'm sorry.
I'm just totally infuriated now. I feel like I need to change something. I don't know what.
Change something. Yeah, I know what you mean.
I feel fairly confident I'm going to have to change something. I just don't know what it is, but it's coming. No,
yeah. And I can't help but think when I see where someone that's lived 102 years old, think of the changes they've seen in their life, from horse and buggy almost to man on the moon to computers to phones in your hand. We've had a lot of changes in our lifetime, yours and mine.
True.
We either embrace it or we don't.
We know people that haven't embraced the change.
We sure do.
Mm-hmm.
We sure do.
And it's like you just want to say, why were you expecting it to remain the same? I don't understand.
Yeah, I see on Facebook, I'm from this small town, and everybody's bemoaning the fact of how it's changed, and a lot of the businesses have closed. People move on. They've left the small town, went for higher pursuits. I'm convinced that's why the small towns are crumbling. So many are crumbling, I think. It's change. You either go with it or not. Our little town's trying to start some change. I wish them well. I don't know if it'll help, but maybe it will. The changes that are coming, they keep saying they're coming. So.
Yeah, but we've also heard that forever. Change is coming, and meanwhile, you're like looking about, scanning the horizon, looking about,
hand over the eyebrow, looking in the forward. What? Nothing yet. Nothing yet, Bob.
Yeah, definitely. Change can be welcomed or it can be shunned, and I think sometimes, like you said, the death, that's going to be a change you'll always shun. You can't prepare yourself for that.
No.
Even if you know the person is sick and the time is nigh.
You're expecting it, but then no, you're not.
Right. He said it's always a surprise.
Yeah, you don't want to think beyond that when you're dealing with someone terminally ill. You don't want to think beyond what's going to be after this. That's when it kind of hits you, I think. That's why it's like, oh no, even though you've been preparing yourself for months. But then it knocks you out when somebody's taken from you suddenly as well. Change.
There's a song, actually. Change.
Change. I thought about that too. I didn't want to sing because I don't have.
I can't sing either. We both stopped before it got bad. Somebody was saying that it's always a surprise when somebody dies, but you know what? I don't think that's the surprise. I think the surprise is that when they've died, there's no more hope. And you are now really on your own without them. That is the surprise. It's not that they died. It's now that you are on the other side and there's nothing you can do about it. You are going to be on your own and you're going to have to figure it out yourself. And you've lost hope because there's no hope anymore for that particular situation. There's hope, but not in that situation. So I don't think it's a surprise that they die. I think it's a surprise that you're now on your own.
Yeah, how to deal with that.
And what is that? That's change. I appreciate your taking the time this morning to hash out the topic of change and, as usual, find no conclusion whatsoever.
I know. We just like to ramble on about nothing.
Well, we're definitely curious about things, but I think at this point, it isn't necessarily the key to answers.
No answers.
No. No. So if people are coming in here expecting answers,
Me too. I'm like, oh, okay. Sorry.
Well, today's topic came in by request.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to let you down again. Take it easy today. Try to stay cool.
Me too.
Yep.
For you.
Yeah,
You're
definitely.
Cool out there, though.
Right now it is cool, but it's not going to stay cool. But we've been up in the hundreds, so it's very warm.
Yes, same here. Usually we have a high indices, but the thermometer reads high 90s. This past weekend, it was over 100, like 108. Not normal. I'm used to the heat index being that, but the actual temperature of the different animals.
Right. That's a big surprise
Yep.
when you look at it.
Another change, another change.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for including me.
This has been an episode of the podcast Curiosity is Key to Knowledge. I'm your host, Julie, along with my co host, CRex, and I hope you enjoyed today's topic.